control matchup, you kind of have to figure the player with access to black probably has a slight edge. Harry Corvese, very familiar with Esper control. Very similar list to kind of what we've been seeing. He has 1 copy of Thoughtseize main. The real key card, though, is Nightveil Spectre, which he has 4 copies of in his sideboard. Yep. I think that's going to really be the key to this matchup.
Here, apparently Harry is very good at standard opens the day after the Invitational, because when we were in Indianapolis last year, he didn't do great in the Invitational, but after sitting down with Shaheen Saroni, kind of working on his Esper control deck, Harry was able to win the standard open the next day there, and so now he's trying to do that again here. He's 7-0-1. Not too surprised to see a draw here with Esper. Wright on his side playing Bant control. Again, with a small red splash here for Ascend the Legion off of 4 copies of Temple of Triumph, and then Sylvan Caryatid can help cast it. But again, his deck is very, very obscure. Really wonder how it's going to be against Esper, as of course here in our control mirror, both players just care about hitting lands to get things started.
Yeah, so Robert doesn't have that much counter spells. He has 3 dissolves, whereas Harry has a full complement of dissolves along with 2 copies of Syncopate and a negate, which he has in his hand.
Here's a copy of Selesnya Charm by Robert Wright. Now, of course, that can be used as a removal spell to take care of some problematic creatures like an Ogzadak Ghost Council, but that's not going to come into play here, as there is a Vigilant Knight token from Robert. So he's going to untap. He's going to take a draw. Corvese with just a couple of lands in play. Harry's going to go down to 18 here, but of course he'll use his life total as a resource, as the Knight doesn't put on enough pressure to get things started and really get Harry kind of scared.
Get that Reduke token in there. So, yeah, it's a kind of an awkward situation for Harry, because he doesn't really want to have to deal with a 2/2 token, but it is something that puts pressure on his life total. So he can't really afford to tap out, just because he doesn't know exactly what Robert's deck is yet. So that 2/2, despite the fact that it seems, innocuous right now, it could prove problematic for Harry down the line.
Robert's going to attack for 2 here yet again with the Knight token. Play a Temple of Mystery. Kept the card on top right away, as Corvese is going to play a Temple of Silence on his side. Decide where he wants to put this card. And again, he'll decide when he wants to take care of that Knight token. As an Esper deck, you do have a lot of answers to get a creature off of the board. So he's just going to play that, keep the card on top, pass it over back to Robert, who, again, he kept his card on top of his deck. So we'll see if we see what it is.
Yeah, again, Harry's not in any rush here. He does have a Supreme Verdict in his hand, so he likely maybe just wants to cast Supreme Verdict and have negate mana up for any potential Elspeth shenanigans. But
that or a dissolve, I think, is the plan here for Corvese. Robert's going to come across for 2 more. He's going to go to 12.
Yeah, and I wonder, you have to wonder whether or not Harry has been seeing Robert around the tables all day, kind of has an idea in terms of what he's playing. When you're playing against a deck like Bant Control, you really, there's a lot of cards they can have that can prove problematic, like Kiora. Kiora isn't a card that I believe Robert has in his deck, but it's something that Harry has to be cognizant of.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, too, because if you're in this situation as Harry is going to play a Jace, Dissolve is going to take care of that. You see that Temple of Triumph out there, and you're thinking, is that for anything? Is that just like an off-color Scryland that's a one-of, that you just want it like that instead of with Plains? Or, what are you really up to here? And as you did mention, there's a chance that Corvese did actually see Wright play at some point over the course of this tournament, because Robert's deck isn't especially quick. And to be fair, neither is Harry's. So,
yeah, both players playing very slow control decks. Robert attempts to cast a Jace Architect of Thought of his own. Harry does have a dissolve, so he is going to dissolve that. He's going to be able to scry. Harry also drew a Mutavault last turn, so that is a card that can jump in front of the Knight token.
Top card is going to go to the bottom there for Corvese. Knight's going to come across. Harry's going to go down to 10. So he's working his way there is right, but again, you have to believe, and if you've ever watched or played with Esper before, or heck, even against it, you know that one single 2/2 is not going to get the job done. This is a pretty good example of why, as this is an Elspeth, Sun's champion. That's going to come into play. Corvese is going to tick that up to 5. 3 soldier tokens will be coming in just a moment, but now Wright actually has something that he actually needs to deal with.
Yeah, so great turn there for Harry. He was able to resolve the Elspeth without even using the negate in his hand. So now he can use the negate on the Jace.
And Wright is having a little bit of mana problems. As a result, he can't actually play 2 spells in 1 turn. And the big question here is, does he have an answer to this Elspeth? He does have 4 Detention Spheres in his deck, but he doesn't have an answer just yet. So Corvese is going to untap all of those lands. He gets to use his Elspeth this turn and do some other fun things too, probably.
Yeah, it looks like he has an Elspeth of his own. Robert has an Elspeth of his own, so he might try to get that to resolve. Harry's going to be able to resolve a Jace Architect finally. Looks like he'll probably just use it to do a mini factor fiction.
And there's a Sphinx's Revelation, a Detention Sphere, and a Temple of Deceit. Revelation going to go along with a land. So Robert's saying, I really care about this Detention Sphere here. A little bit interesting.
Yeah, so Harry has to kind of figure, all right, he probably has Elspeth in his hand. That's probably the card that's not only very important for him to resolve, but it's something that can kind of get him back into this game and combat an opposing Elspeth. But again, Sphinx Revelation Temple, probably too good to pass up here.
Yeah, I mean, the Detention Sphere by itself is a little bit interesting just because how good is the Detention Sphere on this board for Corvese? Even if Wright does have an Elspeth of his own, for example, Harry can, de-sphere the Elspeths. If he'd like to, he can de-sphere the tokens. I mean, he's really got the options here. A little surprised not to see Sphinx's Revelation be split up by itself, but as it is, Corvese is actually going to pick up a card along with it in the Temple of Deceit, which he does play for the turn, and now he's deciding exactly what he wants to do with the Scry.
Yeah, so Harry's in firm control of this game, despite the fact that Robert does have an Elspeth in his hand. Even if he does drop it, Harry will be able to ultimate his Elspeth well before Robert can. So he might actually not even care about Robert resolving Elspeth.
Yeah, I would be surprised if he does, actually. No, I don't know if Harry has a counterspell in his hand or not, but because his Elspeth is so far ahead of Robert's and he can just kind of block down the creatures, he can trade with the Knight with a couple of soldier tokens, things of that nature, he's actually going to be okay, as this looks like a Pithing Needle, a main deck one, just a singleton. It's going to take down the Elspeth.
So I think Harry's more than fine with that. He's already got 6 tokens in play, and he still has a Jace Architect of Thought, which can help him win the game.
Yeah. Again, and the other issue here too is that because this deck does contain Detention Spheres, that Pithing Needle, while doing a nice job of showing out Elspeth right now, isn't the ultimate answer to that card, as Wright is going to pass the turn back over to Corvese.
Yes, and Robert could actually just lose to an ultimate Elspeth pretty quickly because, like you said, Detention can take out Pithing Needle, and there are already still 6 loyalty counters on that Elspeth. Although Robert does have a fog to potentially stop a lethal attack.
Harry does play a Mutavault for his turn. He's going to tick up the Jace, so not ready to cash that in just yet. And with the Sphinx's Revelation in his hand, probably a pretty good reason why. He doesn't really need cards right now with Revelation just kind of being offered up. You're going to see an attack here for 6. Reed Duke's going to get in front of something, and now here's a fog, so never mind. Corvese may scratch his head a little bit here, wondering what the heck's going on here.
So Harry, I think, is more than okay with that, and he's going to pass back. He's still got Sphinx Revelation along with Azorius Charm in his hand, it looks like.
Robert going to draw a card for the turn. He's going to start by playing a Temple of Mystery. One of the things I do like about his deck is he's got a lot of Scry lands with the Temple of Mystery and the 4 copies of Temple of Triumph. A little surprised not to see Temple of Enlightenment hanging out here, but he's not a pure blue-white deck. As Mutavault's going to be activated, it's going to eat that Jace, but the Supreme Verdict is actually going to catch that. Now, of course, the reason Mutavault able to eat that Jace is because the Knight actually is a 1/2 and it attacks from the Jace trigger.
Yes, so Harry is going to lose his Mutavault, but he's going to tap it for mana, and I think he's okay with that, given the fact that he's just going to reload his hand here with the Sphinx Revelation.
You see him tapping a bunch of mana here is Corvese, daring Wright to have a counterspell. Big Revelation number 1, and that is good to go.
So I think that's going to be for 6.
4, 5, 6. Yes, sir.
Pretty good in the control mirror.
One could argue.
He still has that active
6
Jace
life,
in
right?
play
That's
as well.
what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
the 6 life is the key thing.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So he still has an active Jace now. Let's see if he's able to draw multiple counter spells to kind of get this game locked up.
Going to turn over 3 cards here. You see another Sphinx's Revelation, a Hallowed Fountain, and a Temple of Enlightenment. Revelation going to go on its own this time from the split from Robert. Harry does have a Revelation in his hand as well already from the previous Revelation for 6. He'll take another one, he says, and really just bury Robert in some card advantage.
Yeah, he has so many lands already, along with another Mutavault, which he can cast this turn. Looks like he has another Jace Architect of Thought, which he's considering playing.
And he will deploy another Jace, so the Jace that's already in play, going to bite the dust.
This kind of tells me he's still digging for something, possibly either a Detention Sphere or maybe just some more permission. Maybe he feels a little too exposed, despite the fact that he drew a lot of cards. Maybe he didn't draw any permission spells.
It feels like to me, given the matchup and given that Esper takes a little while to get the job done, Harry basically feels like, okay, I'm doing fine right now. I just want to work on getting this game over with as soon as I can because there's a chance that the sideboard games are going to go a little while. And with Esper's propensity to take a while to win, and you see Harry does have a draw in this tournament, he doesn't want another one. He wants to get the W here so he can potentially draw in the next round.
Yeah, so Harry, it looks like he's deciding which cards he wants to discard.
Looks like there's an Azorius Charm among them. He's also got another copy of Elspeth.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he doesn't just discard some lands here. He has more than enough to work with. Yeah, it looks like we're going to see 3 lands get discarded. And interesting here, Harry had a 3-land split, and Robert decided to put 2 lands in one pile and 1 Temple of Enlightenment in another pile. Harry took the 1 land and put 2 cards in the bottom of his library. Now, that could be sort of a way to sort of just get more cards back into your library. Because again, at this point in the game, the difference between 2 lands and 1 land, given his situation, doesn't really matter. Sometimes you just want more cards in your library to just make sure you don't get decked.
Yep. There's 5 mana. This is an Assemble the Legion from Robert. This is what the red splash is all about.
Yeah, I can't imagine Harry cares about this card. He's got an active Jace in play, plus it's really not going to be too threatening right away.
Robert was considering casting a copy of Sylvan Carrier, then he did not. Corvese is going to run a Revelation out here, so this is going to be for 4, I believe. You see 1 and a 2. I like the slow draw. 3.
No, I think it's just 3.
Just for 3.
Yeah.
See, that's why it makes it so much easier for me. As he draws 1 card at a time, I can actually be sure of how many it's going to be. So Harry making my job very easy as he draws a 4th card, which will be his draw for the turn.
Wow, so draws a Syncopate. Don't know if he has a Detention Sphere in that pile there. Still trying to find a way.
He left that on top, so maybe that's the sphere he's looking for. But I'm with you. He's resolved 2 Revelations, which have drawn him a total of 9 cards, and he hasn't really found very much. A little surprising. He's going to cycle Azorius Charm now.
This could be the Aetherling. Or no, it is a Detention Sphere. So he has 1 copy of Aetherling in his deck, which is also very powerful. So does Robert. And it looks like Harry is going to cast Detention Sphere here.
My question for you, do you sphere the Needle or do you sphere the Assembled Legion?
I sphere the Needle.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think
don't
you want
know
to
fear?
I think Assemble gets trumped by Elspeth in general.
Okay.
And especially with Elspeth being at 7 loyalty, I mean, you can end this game pretty quickly.
See what Harry wants to target. Obviously, Detention Sphere is on the stack. It looks like it has resolved, so we'll see what that thing's going to target here. Again, as you did mention, Wright doesn't have a lot of counter magic in his deck, just 3 copies of Resolve.
He doesn't have that much mana in play either, so that Syncopate's very live. Even though this game, we're basically in turn like 25, he only has 8 lands in play. So if he's able to try to cast Elspeth next turn, Syncopate likely just going to counter it anyway.
There is the Detention Sphere taking care of the Needle. Jace is going to tick on up to kind of counteract that Assembled Legion. Elspeth ticks up to 7, threatening the ultimate. Don't know if we're going to see the ultimate next turn or not, but either way, Harry's got his Elspeth back and at least can threaten that ultimate. As you did mention as well, the Syncopate in his hand is actually quite good, as he's just checking to make sure if he did or did not play a land yet this turn.
Yes, he has that 1 Syncopate. I don't think he has Dissolve in his hand, so just a 1 counter spell. But that 1 counter spell might be enough. He has both Planeswalkers in play, so Harry's still in pretty good shape here.
Assemble going to tick on up. And there is your 1 soldier token. Wright will take a draw step here. Looks like it was a land.
Yeah, so Robert's deck just not coming together. He's got 27 lands along with 4 Sylvan Caryatids, so more than half his deck is mana. So getting flooded seems like a serious possibility with this deck.
Elspeth's going to be placed on the stack here by Wright. I think we're going to see Corvese go reaching for that Syncopate, and we do, so that's going to exile the Planeswalker from Robert Wright.
Yeah, so now without Elspeth in his hand, he basically just has lands left, really no other gas. Harry now with 2 Planeswalkers along with a 3rd Revelations in his hand really seems to be in firm control of this game.
And you saw Wright was going to, he did attack there with the Assembled Legion token, does play Sylvan Caryatid. Harry going to block with the Soldier. His Jace trigger, of course, makes it so that the Soldier that did attack was an 0-1, so Harry's not going to lose anything. And again, we'll see, after he does play Temple of Deceit and Scribes with it, how he wants to use Elspeth and Jace this turn. And he says, let's cash in the ultimate. I'll take some 3/3 flyers. Thank you much.
Yeah, so those 3/3 flyers, they're threatening lethal in 2 turns now. If he attacks for 9 now and then 9 again next turn.
Let's not forget either, because it's an emblem, it applies to all creatures, so Mutavault will actually be a 5/5 flyer in this situation, or excuse me, a 4/4 flyer in this situation.
Yeah, and Harry does have another Elspeth in his hand, so even though he loses his original, he will be able to just generate more tokens anyway. So even if Robert does have a Supreme Verdict, he's still going to have to deal with both Elspeth Emblem and the Elspeth Planeswalker.
Harry feeling this game is going so well that he can afford to just tick Jace down, Fire at Mutavault, attack here for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Put Wright down to 5. We'll see if he's going to deploy another Elspeth or cast that brand new detention sphere he just picked up.
Yeah, so it looks like Elspeth's going to join the party to replace the one that he cashed in earlier. And now we're going to see 3 more soldier tokens. So even if Robert is able to draw a Supreme Verdict here, or a Fog potentially to stop the turn, it's only going to buy him 1 turn.
Corvese looks like he's going to cast the D-Sphere as well, take care of the Assembled Legion. Going for a borderline flawless victory here in game number 1. As the Esper control player happily passes the turn back over to Robert Wright, who will draw a card for the turn. As you did mention, it's going to have to be something like a Fog or a Supreme Verdict here. 4 mana being tapped. This is a Jace. Jace is going to tick down. There's an Assembled Legion. This is a Temple Garden. And that is the Sphinx's Revelation that he didn't really want to show, so he picks it up right away. And we will move on to game number 2 as Harry Corvese does win game 1 here over Robert Wright. Esper Control up a game over the non-traditional band control deck. I've got Wright's sideboard in front of me, so we'll start there. Take a look at additional Aetherling in his sideboard to go along with the first one in his main deck, and additional Pithing Needle as well to go along with a Wear and Tear, 3 copies of Archangel of Thune, 2 Jace Memory Adept, a Glare of Heresy, 3 Mistcutter Hydras, 2 Gainsays, and a Ratchet Bomb. Actually, a lot of options here for Robert. The additional Aetherling, obviously huge in this matchup. You've got Pithing Needle, which we saw in that game didn't play a huge role, just kind of a minor annoyance in reality. Wear and Tear can take care of artifacts and enchantments on Harry's side. You've got these 2 Jace Memory Adepts, which are great against control decks, of course, a Glare of Heresy, which can take care of Sphere, as can Ratchet Bomb, 2 copies of Gainsay to try to win the fight over Revelation, and 3 Mistcutter Hydras, which I would be a little surprised if Harry saw coming from this particular deck. It's just a really big haymaker against a control deck, so a lot of options here for Robert.
Yeah, meanwhile, on Harry's side, he's got a pretty good sideboard for control. 4 Night Veil Specters, 1 Revoke Existence, 1 Pithing Needle, 1 Thoughtseize, 2 Dispel. So he has a pretty good anti-control package. Night Veil Spectre is probably the key card here. Kyle Bogemis was talking about how good that card is in general, let alone against control. Robert really doesn't have any ways to answer it. He basically has to try to hope to gainsay it or counter it with a Dissolve. But short of that, he doesn't really have a Azorius Charm. He could Detention Sphere it. But again, not that many efficient ways to answer a Night Veil Spectre. So Night Veil Spectre can prove to be very problematic for Robert. Along with those anti-control cards, Harry has 2 copies of Archangel of Thune, 2 Dark Betrayals, and 2 Blind Obediences. Those probably more of a concession for some of the aggro decks out there. But beyond that, I think you're right. The Mistcutter Hydra is probably going to be the main way Robert's going to have to try to win this game. Try to get into situations where you just keep making your land drops and eventually attack a couple of times with a 5/5 or a 6/6 Mistcutter Hydra. Harry's unlikely to keep his Supreme Verdicts in after board. He might hedge a little bit because we have seen Mistcutter Hydras out of band in the past. But in general, I don't think, given the cards that Harry wants to board in, I don't think he wants to leave in any Supreme Verdicts.
You know, the good thing on Robert's side, we mentioned all the cards that he can sideboard in, upwards of 8 to 10. He's got plenty of cards to sideboard out. Sylvan Carriage can go, the main deck Pithing Needle, the 2 Fogs, the 2 Celestial Charms. I mean, that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 9 cards right there. And that isn't even accounted for the Supreme Verdicts, which aren't at their best in this particular matchup. So he's got plenty to board out and plenty to board in. I'm sure he kind of shores things up against control decks after sideboard.
So Harry Corvese looking to win this game and move on to 8-0-1 to get himself into a top 8 position. We were talking about how this is the new season for the Players' Championship. All these points really matter. Chris Van Meter, he fell short of qualifying for the Players' Championship in Season 1. But he's now 8-0, so he's in good shape to get started for the second season.
Yeah, already off to a fantastic start. Again, some of the points are going to fall off due to the rotation system that is in place here for the seasons, but Chris is already off to a fantastic start, as you did mention, starting, I believe, as you said, 8-0, so should be able to double draw in here, and he had a great Season 1. So, you know, one thing for Chris is that even though he wasn't able to pick up the invite to the Players' Championship in the Season 1 qualification, Season 2 is certainly live, as he's off to a nice start, and the overall top 8 bids at the end of the year as well give him a way to get to the Players' Championship, which I know personally is a huge goal of his this year.
I think that probably the best news for him is that he no longer has to compete against his car mate, travel partner, and best friend, Brian Brandewine, because Brian already has his slot locked up.
To be fair, that means he might be traveling alone now.
That is true.
Since BBD locked it up.
BBD seems like a natural born gamer. I don't see him slowing down anytime soon.
He likes to play. You're not wrong about that. He does like to play. So we'll see what happens with those 2 good friends, obviously BBD and CVM, as BBD, even though the Invitational got off to a great start, started 10-0, ended up losing 5 in a row to go 10-5, won the last round to get exactly 16th place. So from running incredibly hot to running really bad to kind of coasting into a cool 16th place here for Brian. Overall, a good weekend for him. A 16th place Invitational is nothing to be upset about. And of course, getting the first Players Championship invite.
Yeah, I mean, losing 5 in a row is tough, but think about it. You could have lost 5 in a row to start the tournament.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's all about perspective.
Yeah, it's all how you frame it, right? If he starts 0-5, he's gonna, wow, he would be so mad.
Yeah.
But instead, he kind of caught him at an inopportune time, obviously. But it's just all about perspective, as you mentioned.
And I got to say, I was still really impressed with his decks. Both his choices, I think, were pretty good. So I think you can't really ask for more. As long as you play well and you make the correct choices, which I think he did both, you can't really ask for more than that.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in a 16-round tournament, and of course, when you're at the top of the standings, you're going to be playing against some very, very good players over the course of the weekend. And again, he got off to a fantastic start, 8-0 after day 1, 10-0, working his way into day number 2. I mean, I watched him pick up his first loss to Jared Betcher, who was in the top 8 of the Invitational for tomorrow, among other players. So he picked up some losses from some very, very good players. Corvese will be on the draw here. Robert Wright will be on the play. We're going to see this band control deck here in action.
So, yep, it looks like Harry has a bunch of lands, one of them being a scry land. Exactly the type of hand you like against control.
Yeah.
Doesn't have that Night Veil Spectre, but he just drew one. So we might see that enter play this game.
It makes it look easy, because a Temple of Silence is going to come into play here. Corvese going to do a little scry action, as did Robert on the first turn with a Temple of Triumph. Wright will untap. He's going to play a Breeding Pool untapped, and this is a Sylvan Caryatid, knocking right down to 18, so a little bit of acceleration.
So this could potentially allow him to ramp into turn 3 Jace. So that could be pretty important. But let's see what Harry decides to do here. He does have a Thoughtseize, but decides not to cast it. This would suggest that he has a negate in his hand, which he does. Yes, it looks like he has negate.
Yeah, I thought maybe he wanted to give Wright the opportunity to maybe draw into a little something else here. So either way, since he does have a negate at the ready, that makes this play make a lot more sense. The question now, if you're Corvese, is do you want to slam down that Night Veil Spectre? And it looks like the answer is maybe no. It looks like he wanted to cast the Thoughtseize, and he will. Wright's going to show him a hand of double Sphinx's Revelation and just a couple of lands.
Wow, so that is not a good hand in this particular situation. Harry's got to be happy with that. He's going to take one of the Sphinx's Revelation. He can play a land and he has that negate, and Night Veil Spectre is going to cause a problem in a couple of turns.
Yeah, one thing Wright's deck doesn't have really good answers to is Night Veil Spectre. Again, he has Celestial Charm, which is an answer, Fog, stuff like this. He has some weird ways of containing creatures, but none of them do a nice job against Night Veil Spectre. The only thing that does a great job is D-Sphere. But, you can obviously overcome that, as Corvese is going to play a Plains and pass the turn back over to Wright, who draws a Temple Garden for the turn.
Yeah, so I think Harry might want to try to slow play this a little bit, given how bad Rob's hand was. I think even though he knows there's likely not a counterspell. Oh, wow. So Harry actually taps out, allowing Robert to draw just one card. So probably pretty happy for that. I was going to say Harry's likely not even going to cast the Night Veil Spectre this turn because he wants to keep negate mana up. But now that Robert used he basically just cycled the Sphinx's Revelation, I think Harry's probably more than happy to just play the Night Veil Spectre this turn.
Yeah, I think he's probably thrilled with that, and as you mentioned, I think he will go for that. Now, of course, there is something that can occur here where Wright did draw the Aetherling and slams it down on 6 mana when Harry's tapped out. No guarantee that happens, of course, but something to keep in mind if you are Corvese, as he does untap after drawing a card with a Azorius Charm.
Oh, wow. So it looks like Harry has a Dissolve as well. So since he has both Dissolve and negate, he might try to slow play this a little bit and not rush it. Now he might kind of wait 2 turns just to get to 6 mana. Because like you said, you don't want to lose to Elspeth or Aetherling.
Yeah, and really the situation, as Wright does draw, make up a Detention Sphere, your opponent's hand is very, very weak, and you know that your hand is very strong, so really, what's the rush?
Yeah, there's really no rush here. So Harry draws, it looks like a Sphinx of Revelation, and he does have 2 Hallowed Fountains, so looks like he's going to play 1 untapped. This gives him access to Dissolve and negate, even if he chooses not to cast a spell this turn. And he is going to pass.
He's going to pass the turn back. I wouldn't be surprised if he just revs for 2 here. It's a little bit risky just because Wright could rev in response, but he's going to rev for 2. And it looks like Wright picked up a Gainsay, but he's going to actually let this resolve. So saving the Gainsay for maybe a fight over an Aetherling or counter magic.
Yeah, so Wright has a Gainsay and a Detention Sphere. And Harry draws another Dissolve and another Night Veil Spectre. So let's see how he wants to play this. I'd imagine we're going to see one of the Night Veil Spectres.
Yeah, this seems like Test Spell City. He casts a Night Veil Spectre. He forces Wright to have some sort of answer to it. Wright's going to play the Temple of Triumph at the top of his deck. He's going to scry the card to the top. He's probably going to use the D-Sphere here. Let me see if Harry wants to counter back or not. The only reason I think he would want to fight over this is just because Wright kept the card on top of his deck with the Temple, like, right away. So if you fight over this and you win the fight, then you get the card at the top of your deck. So I'm not too surprised to see him cast a counterspell and negate, and Gainsay will take care of that.
Yeah, I think I kind of like fighting for it here because you still have multiple dissolves, so you can just play a second Night Veil Spectre now, and you already got one of the counterspells out of Robert's hand. So now you got to feel pretty good about your situation.
Harry going to go for Elspeth instead. A little surprised there.
Wow, so he drew an Elspeth, and yeah, I like this play. I mean, obviously Night Veil Spectre is good, but if you can resolve an Elspeth, you go for it.
All right. Wright can untap very quickly. He'll take a draw. It's a forest. Passes the turn back. I wonder what he kept.
Looks like it was a Mistcutter Hydra, maybe.
Okay.
Yep, it is a Mistcutter Hydra.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not very good against Elspeth. So Harry exposed himself a little bit to Aetherling, but
Yeah.
again, I think it was probably worth it just because I think Elspeth plus a Night Veil Spectre the following turn, I think you're still in good shape even against an Aetherling.
2 mana, there's a Glare Heresy. It's going to target Elspeth. Harry is going to dissolve that very quickly. So it's time for the Esper control player to scry. Top card's going to go to the bottom. See if Wright has anything else to do in this turn. Just going to play a land and pass the turn back with just the Mistcutter Hydra. Corvese will untap all of those soldiers. We'll see how he wants to use Elspeth, but he'll start with a scry on top of the Lightning, which will stay on the top.
So Elspeth now at 7 loyalty, threatening lethal next turn all of a sudden.
Doesn't take long.
Doesn't take long.
She does not mess around.
Does not seem like a fair card. Not sure what Wizards was thinking.
And an extension of the hand. Harry Corvese going to win this match over Robert Wright in very impressive fashion. 2-0. Esper Control moves on to 8-0-1. With any luck for Corvese, he'll be able to draw next round. For Wright, he picks up his second loss, moves down to 7-2.